Jake Collins walked through the massive doors of the throne room. His footsteps echoed in the huge space. The walls were made of smooth black stone that seemed to glow from within. Strange symbols covered every surface, telling stories of worlds conquered and species destroyed. He had traveled for 3 months to reach this place, Earth's first ambassador to the Zephyrian Empire. His mission was simple: make peace with the aliens who ruled half the galaxy. But now, standing in this enormous room, Jake felt very small. The Emperor sat on a throne made of crystal that reached up to the ceiling. Emperor Vextar was not like any creature Jake had ever seen. His body was tall and thin, made of what looked like living glass. 6 arms moved constantly, each one holding different tools of power. His eyes glowed bright amber, like stars in the darkness dot around the throne. Hundreds of alien beings knelt in perfect rows. These were the servants and soldiers of the Empire. Some looked like giant insects. Others were covered in scales or fur. All of them kept their heads down, afraid to look at their ruler. Jake stopped in the center of the room. A circle of light appeared around his feet. He was exactly where the Emperor wanted him to be. So, Emperor Vextar spoke, his voice like breaking glass. The humans have finally sent someone to speak with us. How ... interesting. Jake lifted his chin and looked directly at the Emperor. This was not what the alien ruler expected. Other species always looked down when they came here. They trembled with fear. But this human stared right back at him. I am Ambassador Jake Collins, representing the people of Earth, Jake said clearly. I come seeking peaceful relations between our species. The Emperor laughed. The sound filled the room like thunder. Many of the kneeling aliens shook with terror at the noise. Peaceful relations? Vextar repeated. You misunderstand your situation, little human. You are not here to negotiate. You are here to receive our judgment. Jake felt his heart beating fast, but he kept his face calm. During his time on the capital world, he had learned much about the Zephyrian Empire. They had conquered over 200 star systems. Every species they met had only 2 choices: join the Empire as slaves or die. For 300 years, the Emperor continued, we have brought order to this galaxy. Weak species like yours have always seen the wisdom of joining us. Those who refused, well, their worlds are now empty spaces between the stars. Emperor Vextar stood up from his throne. Even from far away, Jake could see that the alien was at least 12 feet tall. The 6 arms moved in patterns that meant different things in Zephyrian culture. Jake had studied their language and customs. He knew the Emperor was showing his power. Your species is young, Vextar said. You have only been in space for a few decades. You have 40 small ships that you call a fleet. We have fleets that number in the thousands. Your weapons are simple. Your technology is basic. Yet you dare to ask for peaceful relations as if you were our equals. The Emperor walked down the steps from his throne. Each step he took made a sound like ringing bells. The other aliens in the room pressed their faces closer to the floor. But we are not unreasonable, Vextar continued. We offer you the same choice we have offered every species. Join the Zephyrian Empire. Accept your place as a client species. Your people will work for us, fight for us, serve us. In return, we will allow you to live. Jake had expected this moment. Earth's leaders had talked about what he should say if the aliens demanded surrender. Some wanted him to accept any deal that would save lives. Others wanted him to refuse and prepare for war. But standing here now, Jake realized that the choice was not really about Earth's leaders. It was about what it meant to be human. And if we refuse? Jake asked. The Emperor's glowing eyes grew brighter. Then in 30 of your days, our grand fleet will arrive at your world. Every human city will burn. Every human ship will be destroyed. Your species will become nothing more than a memory. The throne room became completely silent. Even the emperor's servants stopped moving. This was the moment when every other species had begged for mercy. Some offered their most beautiful art or their greatest treasures. Others promised to serve the empire better than any previous species. All of them had accepted slavery to avoid. Death. Jake took a deep breath. He thought about Earth, the blue oceans, the white clouds, the green forests. He thought about the cities where billions of humans lived and worked and loved. He thought about children playing in parks and scientists, working in laboratories and artists, creating beautiful things. Then he thought about those same children growing up as slaves. He imagined human scientists forced to build weapons for their conquerors. He pictured human artists creating only what their alien masters wanted to see. Jake straightened his shoulders and looked the emperor directly in his glowing eyes. Want war? Jake said, his voice steady and strong. Then you'll get one. But understand this. Humans don't just fight wars. We perfect them. The silence in the throne room became even deeper. Emperor Vextar's 6 arms stopped moving. His amber eyes stared at Jake with what might have been surprise. Then the emperor began to laugh again. But this time, the sound was different. There was anger in it now, and maybe even a tiny bit of uncertainty. Perfect war? Vextar repeated. You have 40 ships against our thousands. You have one world against our empire. You have been in space for less than a century, while we have ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. What could you possibly know about war that we do not? Jake smiled for the first time since entering the throne room. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that said he knew something the emperor did not. You're about to find out, Jake replied. The emperor's laughter stopped. For just a moment, something like doubt crossed his alien features. But then his confidence returned. He waved one of his 6 hands, and guards began moving toward Jake. 30 days, Emperor Vextar declared. 30 days for your leaders to come to their senses. When our fleet arrives at Earth, we will ask one final time for your surrender. If you refuse again, we will show the galaxy what happens to species that defy the Zephyrian Empire. Jake was escorted from the throne room by 6 guards. As the massive doors closed behind him, he could hear the Emperor talking to his advisors about which ships to send to destroy Earth. But Jake was not worried. During his months on the capital world, he had learned something very important about the Zephyrian Empire. They were strong, yes. They had powerful weapons and huge fleets. But they had one critical weakness. They had never fought anyone who refused to surrender. Jake smiled again as the guards led him to his ship. Emperor Vextar thought he was sending a message of terror back to Earth. Instead, Jake was bringing home the key to the Empire's destruction. The war was about to begin, and the Zephyrians had no idea what they had just started. Jake's ship landed on Earth 3 days after his meeting with Emperor Vextar. The news of his defiant response had already reached home through faster communication channels. When he stepped off the transport, reporters surrounded him with cameras and questions. Ambassador Collins, is it true that you declared war on the Zephyrian Empire? One reporter shouted. Did you really tell them that humans perfect war? Called another. Jake pushed through the crowd without answering. He had more important things to do than talk to newspeople. 27 days remained before the alien fleet would arrive. Every minute counted now. The Global Defense Council met in an underground bunker beneath New York City. President Lisa Martinez sat at the head of a long table. Around her were the most powerful leaders on Earth, generals, scientists, and politicians from every nation. Their faces showed fear and anger in equal measure. Jake, what have you done to us? General Rick Thompson slammed his hand on the table. We have 40 ships. Intelligence reports say they're bringing thousands. You've signed humanity's death warrant. Jake took his seat and looked around the room. These people had trusted him to make peace. Instead, he had brought them war. But he had also brought them something else, hope. General Thompson is right about the numbers, Jake began. We cannot win a direct fight against the Zephyrian fleet. But we're not going to fight them the way they expect. President Martinez leaned forward. Explain. Jake activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed the Zephyrian Empire, hundreds of star systems connected by trade routes and communication networks. During my time on their capital world, I learned something important, Jake continued. The Zephyrians have been the strongest power in the galaxy for 3,000 years. Every species they've met has either surrendered immediately or been destroyed quickly. They've never fought a real war. What do you mean? Asked Dr. Carl Hayes, Earth's leading expert on alien biology. Their military tactics haven't changed in centuries, Jake explained. They show up with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and either accept it or destroy everything. They've never faced guerrilla warfare. They've never dealt with an enemy that refuses to quit. Captain Amy Baker, Earth's most decorated pilot, studied the display carefully. You're talking about fighting them across their entire empire, not just defending Earth. Exactly. Jake pointed to different systems on the map. They expect us to gather all our forces here at Earth and wait for them to arrive. Instead, we scatter our forces across 50 different systems and hit them everywhere at once. General Thompson shook his head. That's suicide. We'll be outnumbered 100 to 1 in every battle. We won't be fighting battles, Jake replied. We'll be fighting a war. There's a difference. Dr. Hayes had been quiet during the discussion, but now he spoke up. I've been studying the biological samples you brought back from the Zephyrian capital. Their neural systems are very different from ours. I might be able to develop something that affects them, but not us. A biological weapon? President Martinez asked. Something like that. Give me 2 weeks and access to the best laboratories. On Earth, Captain Baker was still studying the star map. We'll need modified ships. Faster engines, better stealth systems, longer range. And we'll need pilots crazy enough to take on an entire empire. I know where to find pilots like that. She continued with a smile. The same places we've always found them. People who think impossible is just another word for fun. Over the next few days, the plan began to take shape. Earth's 40 ships would be split into 8 squadrons of 5 ships each. Each squadron would target a different part of the Zephyrian Empire. They would hit supply depots, communication, stations, and isolated outposts. The goal was not to win battles, but to spread fear and confusion throughout the Empire. Meanwhile, Dr. Hayes worked day and night in his laboratory. The Zephyrian biological samples showed interesting weaknesses. Their neural systems relied on electrical patterns that were very different from human brains. A virus that disrupted those patterns might cripple their ability to think clearly without affecting humans at all. Captain Baker led the effort to modify Earth's ships. The work was done in secret facilities around the world. Engineers removed weapons and cargo space to make room for better engines and stealth systems. The ships would be fast and hard to detect, but they would have to rely on surprise rather than firepower. Jake spent his time studying everything he had learned about Zephyrian culture and military organization. He had observed their ships, their weapons, and their tactics during his stay on the capital world. Most importantly, he had learned about their psychology. The Zephyrians believed they were the greatest civilization in the galaxy. They had never been seriously challenged. This confidence was their strength, but it was also their weakness. They would not expect humans to fight back effectively. They would not be prepared for enemies who refused to surrender even when facing certain death. On the 10th day after Jake's return, President Martinez called another meeting of the Global Defense Council. This time, the mood was different. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with determination. "The modifications to our fleet are almost complete," Captain Baker reported. "The pilots have been training with the new systems. They're ready." Dr. Hayes looked tired but excited. "The biological weapon is ready for testing. If it works as expected, it will give us a significant advantage." General Thompson had been the biggest opponent of Jake's plan, but even he seemed more confident now. "The ground forces are prepared. If the Zephyrians manage to land troops on any human worlds, they'll find that we know how to fight on our own territory." Jake nodded to each of them. 17 days remain before their fleet arrives at Earth. By then, we need to be in position across their empire. The moment they discover that Earth is defended, we begin hitting targets throughout their territory. "What about the people?" President Martinez asked. "Billions of humans are going to be terrified when they learn we're at war with a galactic empire." "Tell them the truth," Jake replied. "Tell them that we have a choice between freedom and slavery, and we choose freedom. Tell them that humanity has never been conquered, and we don't plan to start now." Captain Baker stood up from her chair. "My squadron will target their main supply depot in the Kepler system. If we can destroy their fuel reserves, it will limit their ability to move ships around the galaxy. My team will focus on communication networks," added Lieutenant Ben Rogers, one of Baker's best pilots. "If we can disrupt their ability to coordinate, they'll have trouble responding to multiple attacks." Dr. Hayes packed his biological weapon carefully into secure containers. "This will be loaded onto every ship in our fleet. When the time comes, we'll release it into their air systems." As the meeting ended, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and terror. In less than 3 weeks, humanity would either prove itself capable of standing up to a galactic empire, or Earth would become another dead world floating in space. But as he looked around the room at the determined faces of Earth's leaders, Jake felt something he had not expected to feel when he first declared war on the Zephyrian Empire. He felt hope that the aliens thought they were coming to destroy a weak species that had foolishly refused to surrender. Instead, they were about to learn what it meant to fight humans who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The war was about to begin, and Earth was ready. Admiral Kethmer commanded the largest fleet in Zephyrian history. 2,000 ships of various sizes moved through space toward the small blue world called Earth. The Admiral had destroyed 17 civilizations during his long career. This would be his 18th? He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the human solar system grow larger on the main display. His 4 eyes studied the readings from his sensors. Something was wrong. "Where are their ships?" he asked his tactical officer. "We detect no human vessels in the system, Admiral. Their orbital stations appear to be empty as well." Kethmer's scaled hands tightened into fists. In his experience, species facing extinction usually gathered all their forces for one final desperate battle. But the humans seemed to have abandoned their own world. "Perhaps they have already fled," suggested Commander Yethal, the Admiral's second in command. "Impossible. Our intelligence shows they have only 40 ships total. Not enough to evacuate their entire population." Kethmer studied the display more carefully. "Move the fleet into attack formation. Something is not right here." As the Zephyrian fleet approached Earth, a small communications beacon activated near the planet's moon. The signal was strong enough to reach every ship in the invasion force. Jake Collins' voice spoke clearly through the static. "Admiral Kethmer, I presume you're listening. This is Ambassador Jake Collins of Earth. You wanted to see how humans fight? Class is now in session." The message repeated 3 times, then the beacon went silent. Kethmer felt a chill run down his spine. How did the humans know his name? How? Did they know he was commanding this fleet? The Zephyrian Empire's intelligence networks were supposed to be perfect. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "we're detecting energy signatures from the planet's surface. It appears their cities are protected by some kind of shield system." "Impossible. Our scouts recorded no such technology." "The shields are definitely there, Admiral. Power readings are significant." Kethmer ordered a test bombardment. 12 ships fired their primary weapons at the largest human city. The energy beams struck invisible barriers and dissipated harmlessly. The shields held without even flickering. "What kind of shields are these?" Kethmer demanded. "Unknown technology, sir. Our weapons appear to have no effect." While the Admiral tried to understand how the humans had developed such advanced defenses, reports began arriving from across the Zephyrian Empire. Human ships were attacking targets in 17 different star systems. Simultaneously, Captain Amy Baker led her squadron in a devastating assault on the fuel depot in the Kepler system. The Zephyrians had built their supply station in what they thought was an impossible location, deep inside an asteroid field where no enemy could safely navigate. They were wrong. Baker's modified ships moved through the asteroid field like dancers, their improved engines and navigation systems allowing them to fly where Zephyrian vessels could not follow. Her ships carried nuclear weapons instead of traditional energy weapons, a technology the Empire had abandoned. Centuries ago, as primitive the fuel depot exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Enough fuel to power 100 ships for a year vanished in seconds. "Target destroyed," Baker reported over the communication channel. "Moving to secondary objectives." Lieutenant Ben Rogers led a different kind of attack. His ships were equipped with computer viruses designed by Earth's best hackers, programs that could infiltrate Zephyrian networks and cause chaos. Rogers' team approached a communication relay station that connected dozens of star systems. Instead of destroying it, they infected it with their virus. Within hours, the infection spread through the Empire's communication networks, causing messages to be delayed, misdirected, or corrupted. Suddenly, the Zephyrian Empire could not coordinate its responses to the human attacks. But the most shocking attack came from Lieutenant Paul Green, who was supposed to be dead. Green's ship had been destroyed during the approach to Earth, shot down by a Zephyrian patrol. The aliens had watched his vessel explode and confirmed no life signs. They had no idea that Green had ejected in a special survival pod designed to look like space debris. For 3 days, Green drifted in space, letting the Zephyrian fleet pass by him. Then, when Admiral Kethmer's flagship was directly overhead, Green activated his pod's hidden systems. The pod was actually a nuclear bomb with a guidance. System. Green piloted his improvised missile straight into the Eternal Conquest's engine room. The explosion tore through the massive ship, setting off secondary explosions that destroyed 3 other vessels nearby. Admiral Kethmer survived, but his flagship was crippled. Half of his fleet's command and control systems were offline. The Zephyrian invasion force was now scattered and confused, trying to understand how a single human had penetrated their defenses. "How is this possible?" Kethmer demanded as his engineers worked to restore his ship's systems. The human was confirmed dead. "It appears they are willing to sacrifice their lives to damage our forces," Commander Yithel replied. "This is not typical behavior for the species we have conquered." On the planet's surface, Dr. Carl Hayes watched the battle from a hidden command center. His biological weapon had been loaded into the atmosphere processors of every major city. When the Zephyrian ships tried to land ground forces, they would breathe air filled with a virus that would slowly destroy their ability to think clearly. But the aliens were not trying to land. They were pulling back, confused and disorganized by the human attacks across their empire. They're retreating, reported General Thompson from the Military Command Center. The invasion fleet is moving away from Earth. Jake Collins smiled as he watched the tactical display. They're not retreating. They're regrouping. Admiral Kethmare is a good commander. He knows when he's been outsmarted. Outsmarted? Think about it. He came here expecting to find a weak species ready to surrender. Instead, he found empty orbital stations, shields that can stop his weapons, and enemies willing to die to hurt him. Meanwhile, his empire is under attack in 17 different places. He has to choose between completing the invasion of Earth or saving his own territory. President Martinez joined them in the command center. What do you think he'll choose? He'll try to do both, Jake replied. He'll leave part of his fleet here to maintain the siege while sending the rest back to defend the empire. That's exactly what we want him to do. As if to confirm Jake's prediction, the Zephyrian fleet began to split up. Half the ships remained in orbit around Earth, while the others jumped back to hyperspace to deal with the human attacks throughout the Empire. Phase 2 begins now, Jake announced. Captain Baker, begin hitting their supply lines. Lieutenant Rogers, expand the virus attack to their military networks. All other squadrons, continue targeting their infrastructure. The real war was just beginning. Across the galaxy, Zephyrian commanders were receiving reports of human attacks on their territories. The humans were not fighting like any enemy the Empire had faced before. They did not try to hold territory or capture ships. They simply appeared, destroyed something important, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Emperor Vextar received the reports in his crystal throne room. For the first time in his long reign, he felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. How many ships have we lost? He asked his military advisors. 47 destroyed, over 100 damaged, came their reply. But that's not the worst part. They've destroyed fuel depots, communication relays, and supply stations across the Empire. Our ability to coordinate military operations has been severely compromised. And what of the invasion of Earth? Admiral Kethmer reports that the planet is more heavily defended than expected. The humans have technology we don't understand. Emperor Vextar's 6 arms moved in patterns that showed his anger. They are one primitive species with 40 ships. How can they be causing so much trouble? Because they fight differently than anyone we've faced before, his chief military advisor replied carefully. They don't try to win battles. They try to make it impossible for us to fight the war. The Emperor's glowing eyes brightened dangerously. Then we will show them what happens when they anger the Zephyrian Empire. Send word to every fleet commander. I want every human ship destroyed. I want every human world burned. I want their species erased from existence. But even as he gave the order, Vextar knew that something had changed. The humans had drawn first blood, and the taste of it was bitter. The war was far from over. Emperor Vextar's rage grew with each passing day. What had started as a simple conquest was becoming a nightmare that threatened his entire empire. Reports flooded in from across Zephyrian space. More attacks, more destroyed facilities, more ships lost to human raiders. Send everything, the Emperor commanded his fleet admirals. I want every available ship hunting these humans. Find them and destroy them. But for every ship the Emperor sent to hunt humans, one less ship was available to guard the Empire's borders. The Zephyrians had ruled through fear for thousands of years. Now, for the first time, that fear was being turned against them. On the industrial world of Kepler 442, a human slave named Paul Green watched the news reports with growing excitement. He was not the same Paul Green who had sacrificed his life to damage the Zephyrian flagship that had been Lieutenant Paul Green of Earth's Space Force. This Paul Green was a factory worker who had been captured during an early exploration mission and forced to work in alien mines. Did you hear? He whispered to his fellow workers during their brief rest period. The humans are fighting back. They're actually fighting back. The other human slaves gathered around him in the shadows of the mining facility. There were perhaps 50 humans on this world, taken from various Earth colonies and research stations. They had been slaves for years, believing that Earth had forgotten them. "It's impossible," said Maria Santos, a scientist who had been captured 3 years ago. "Earth only has a few dozen ships. The Zephyrians have thousands." "Look at the reports," Paul insisted, pointing to the news display that the aliens used to show their power. "Human ships are hitting targets all across the Empire. They're not trying to win battles. They're trying to collapse the whole system." An idea began to form in Paul's mind. The Zephyrians had brought humans to this world to work in their weapons factories. The slaves built the energy weapons that the Empire used to conquer other species. But what if those weapons could be turned against their creators? "I know this facility better than anyone," Paul said quietly. "I've been here for 4 years. I know where the weapons are stored, where the power systems are located, where the guards are weakest." "What are you suggesting?" asked Dr. Maria Santos. "I'm suggesting we stop being slaves and start being soldiers." Word of Paul's plan spread quickly through the human slave population. They had been trained by Earth's military in basic combat techniques before their capture. It was standard procedure for anyone leaving the solar system. But they had never had the opportunity to use that training. Now they did. On the night of the new moon, when the factory was operating with minimal security, Paul led his fellow humans in an uprising that would become legendary throughout the galaxy. The first target was the weapons storage facility. The human slaves had been building energy rifles for months, but they had never been allowed to touch the finished products. Paul's team overwhelmed the guards and seized enough weapons to arm every human on the planet. The second target was the communication center. Dr. Maria Santos used her scientific knowledge to hack into the facility systems and send a message to every human colony in the galaxy. "This is Kepler 442. The slaves are fighting back. Join us." The third target was the power plant that supplied energy to the entire industrial complex. Paul himself led the assault on this facility, using improvised explosives made from mining equipment to destroy the main reactor. The explosion could be seen from orbit. But Paul's uprising was just the beginning. Dr. Carl Hay's biological weapon had been spreading through the Zephyrian military networks for weeks. The virus did not kill the aliens, but it made them confused and slow to react. Zephyrian commanders began making mistakes they had never made before. Captain Amy Baker took advantage of this confusion to strike at the heart of the Empire's industrial capacity. Her squadron had grown from 5 ships to 15 as she captured Zephyrian vessels and recruited alien pilots who had been slaves of the Empire. "This is Baker to all units," she broadcast on the human military frequency. "We're hitting the shipyards at Proxima Centauri. Intelligence reports indicate they're building a new superweapon there." Baker's mixed fleet of human and captured alien ships emerged from hyperspace directly inside the shipyard's defensive perimeter. The Zephyrian guards were so confused by this biological weapon that they barely responded to the attack. The shipyard contained the largest warship ever built by the Zephyrian Empire, a massive vessel designed to destroy entire star systems. Baker's forces planted nuclear charges throughout the ship's structure and detonated them all at once. The explosion was so powerful that it destroyed not only the superweapon, but the entire shipyard complex. The economic impact was devastating. The Empire had invested decades of resources in the facility, but the most important effect was psychological. The Zephyrians had thought their core territories were safe from human attack. Now they realized that nowhere in their empire was beyond the reach of human raiders. News of the human victories spread to every species in the galaxy. The Altarian bird people, who had been conquered by the Zephyrians 50 years ago, began sabotaging their alien overseers. The aquatic cetaceans of Proxima b destroyed their underwater cities rather than let them be used as bases for the Zephyrian military. Most importantly, the Drakmari, a warrior species that had been enslaved a century ago, rose up in a full rebellion. Unlike the other client species, the Drakmari had maintained their military traditions even in slavery. When they learned that humans were successfully fighting the Empire, they began their own war of independence. Emperor Vexstar watched his empire crumble from his crystal throne. The reports coming in were worse than his worst nightmares. Slave rebellions on dozens of worlds, supply lines cut, military facilities destroyed, and still the human raiders struck at targets throughout his territory. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked his military advisors. "Approximately 800 combat-ready vessels," came the reply. "But they're scattered across the Empire, trying to deal with various threats." "And the humans?" "Our intelligence suggests they started with 40 ships, but they've been capturing our vessels and recruiting alien pilots. Current estimates put their fleet at over 200 ships." The Emperor's crystalline form began to crack under the stress. 200 ships are defeating an empire of thousands? "It's not just the ships," his advisor replied carefully. "It's the effect they're having on our subject species. The humans have shown that the Empire can be successfully opposed. Every species we've conquered is now questioning our authority." Captain Amy Baker had become a legend among the resistance fighters. Her famous broadcast, transmitted to every world in the galaxy, had inspired millions of beings to fight for their freedom. "We didn't start this war, but we'll damn sure finish it. To every slave, every prisoner, every being who dreams of freedom, the Zephyrian Empire is not invincible. They bleed, they fear, they can be defeated. Rise up and fight." The Empire's response was predictable, but counterproductive. They began executing slaves and prisoners as punishment for the rebellions. But instead of discouraging resistance, this only made more species join the fight against Zephyrian rule. Jake Collins, now commanding a coalition of free worlds from a captured Zephyrian battle station, watched the tactical displays with satisfaction. The Empire was collapsing from within, just as he had hoped. "Status report," he asked his staff. 17 star systems had declared independence in the past week, reported Lieutenant Ben Rogers, who had survived his virus attack and was now coordinating intelligence operations. "The Drakmari have liberated their home system and are advancing on 3 more. The Altarians have taken control of their orbital defenses." "What about the Zephyrian military?" "Scattered and demoralized. The biological weapon has affected their ability to coordinate large-scale operations. Many of their commanders are making irrational decisions." Jake nodded. "And Emperor Vexstar?" "Still in his palace on the capital world. Our sources suggest he's preparing for a final assault, either on Earth or on one of the rebel strongholds." Jake studied the galactic map, noting the rapidly changing political situation. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed invincible just months ago, was now fighting for survival. But the war was not over yet. "He'll come after Earth," Jake decided. "It's personal now. We humiliated him in front of his entire empire. He won't be able to live with that. Can we stop him?" Jake smiled grimly. "We don't need to stop him. We just need to make sure that when he comes, he finds something he doesn't expect." The final battle was approaching, and Jake Collins was ready. Emperor Vexstar stood in the ruins of his once magnificent throne room. The crystal walls were cracked, and several of his 6 arms hung useless at his sides. Reports from across the Empire told the same story: rebellion, defeat, and the collapse of everything he had built. "Your Majesty," his remaining advisor said carefully, "perhaps it is time to consider terms of surrender." The Emperor's glowing eyes flared with rage. Surrender? To a species that crawled out of their single world barely a century ago? Never. But, even as he spoke, Vexstar knew the truth. His empire was finished. Half of his territories had declared independence. His fleets were scattered and demoralized. The biological weapon continued to affect his military leaders, making coordination impossible. Still, he had one final card to play. "Prepare my personal fleet," the Emperor commanded. "I will go to Earth myself and finish what we started. If I cannot rule the galaxy, then I will at least have the satisfaction of watching that blue world burn." Admiral Kethmer, now serving as the Emperor's last loyal commander, gathered the remaining ships of the Imperial fleet. Once, this force had numbered in the thousands. Now, fewer than 300 vessels prepared for the final assault on Earth. But as the Zephyrian fleet approached the human solar system, they found something they did not expect. Earth was no longer alone. Ships from dozens of species surrounded the blue planet. Drakmari war vessels flew alongside Altarian fighters. Cetacean submarines had been modified for space combat. Former slaves and conquered peoples from across the galaxy had come to defend the world that had taught them how to fight for freedom. Jake Collins stood on the bridge of the captured battle station that served as his flagship. Captain Amy Baker was beside him, along with Paul Green, who had escaped from Kepler 442 after leading the slave uprising there. "How many ships?" Jake asked. "Over 1,000, Baker replied. "Representatives from every species the Zephyrians conquered. They all want to be here for the end. And the Emperor? His flagship is in the center of their formation. He's definitely here." Jake activated the communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies. His voice reached every ship in both fleets, human, alien, and Zephyrian. "Emperor Vexstar, this is Jake Collins. You came here once before demanding our surrender. I told you then that humans don't just fight wars, we perfect them. Today, you see the result of that perfection." The Emperor's response crackled through the static. "You have destroyed my empire, human, but you cannot escape the consequences. If I cannot rule, then no one will. I will use my final weapon to destroy this entire system." Jake had expected this. Intelligence reports suggested that the Emperor's flagship carried a weapon capable of destroying stars. It was his ultimate threat: surrender or die, along with your entire solar system. "You're welcome to try," Jake replied calmly. "But first, let me show you something." The tactical display on every ship in the Zephyrian fleet suddenly changed. Instead of showing the positions of the defending forces, it now displayed a new image: the Zephyrian capital world. "While you've been traveling here," Jake continued, "a small team of volunteers infiltrated your capital. They're standing in your throne room right now. Dr. Maria Santos, whom you enslaved on Kepler 442, is leading them." On the Emperor's flagship, the communication officer confirmed the impossible. "Sir, we're receiving signals from the capital. There are humans in the palace." "How?" Vexstar demanded. Jake's voice answered him. "We learned from you, Emperor. You taught us that the best way to defeat an enemy is to strike at their heart when they least expect it. While you brought your fleet here for revenge, we took your home." The Emperor's form began to crack further as stress fractured his crystalline body. "It doesn't matter. I still have enough firepower to destroy Earth and everyone defending it." "Yes, you do," Jake agreed. "But ask yourself this: what happens to you afterward? Your empire is gone. Your capital is occupied. Your surviving ships are surrounded by enemies. Even if you destroy us, you'll still be a prisoner in your own galaxy. For the first time in thousands of years, Emperor Vextar had no response. Continued his broadcast, but now he was speaking to the Zephyrian crews rather than their emperor. Soldiers of the Empire, this is your chance to choose. You can follow your emperor into mutual destruction, or you can help us build something better. Admiral Kethmer was the first to respond. The scarred veteran had fought humans for months, and had learned to respect their courage and intelligence. This is Admiral Kethmer to all ships. I am ordering a ceasefire. Lower your weapons. You dare defy me? The Emperor screamed. I dare to save what's left of our people, Kethmer replied. The Empire is finished, Your Majesty. The humans have shown us a better way. One by one, the Zephyrian ships powered down their weapons. Some crews mutinied against their officers. Others simply refused to obey orders. The Emperor found himself commanding a fleet that would no longer follow him. In desperation, Vextar attempted to activate his star-destroying weapon manually, but he discovered that his own engineers had sabotaged the device rather than participate in genocide. Even his most loyal servants had abandoned him. The final surrender came not through battle, but through the Emperor's complete isolation. His own people, recognizing that the war was lost and that their survival depended on making peace with the coalition forces, removed him from power. Jake Collins found himself accepting the surrender, not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. In the negotiations that followed, the Zephyrian Empire was dissolved. Its former territories became independent worlds, many of them joining together in a new alliance based on mutual cooperation rather than domination. The former emperor was exiled to a small world where he could live out his days in isolation, his crystalline form slowly healing, but his power gone forever. Captain Amy Baker was offered command of the new coalition fleet, a position she accepted with the understanding that it would be used only for defense and exploration, never conquest. Paul Green returned to Kepler 442, but now as the elected leader of a free world rather than a slave. The factories that had once built weapons for the Empire were converted to produce tools for exploration and peaceful development. Dr. Carl Hayes destroyed his biological weapon and dedicated his research to healing the psychological damage that the virus had caused to Zephyrian veterans. As for Jake Collins, he found himself serving as Earth's first ambassador to the Free Worlds Alliance, a coalition of species that had learned the value of liberty through their struggle against tyranny. The day the peace treaty was signed, Jake stood once again in what had been the Emperor's throne room. But now, instead of a crystal throne dominating the space, there was a round table where representatives from dozens of species could meet as equals. What happens now? Asked Captain Baker. Jake looked out through the great windows at the ships of the Alliance fleet, vessels from dozens of worlds flying together in formation. Now we do something the galaxy has never seen before. We build a civilization based on freedom instead of fear. And if another empire rises to threaten that freedom, Jake smiled the same smile he had worn when he first defied Emperor Vextar. Then they'll learn the same lesson the Zephyrians learned. Humans don't just fight wars. We perfect them. But more importantly, we teach others how to fight for themselves. The war was over, but the peace that followed was built on a foundation stronger than any empire. The knowledge that freedom was worth fighting for, and that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they refused to surrender. Their dignity. Emperor Vextar had asked if humans wanted war. Jake Collins had shown him something better. He had shown him what it meant to be free. Years later, when new species were discovered and welcomed into the Alliance, they would learn the story of how a single human's defiant response, an ultimatum, had brought down the greatest empire in galactic history. They would learn that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to do what was right, despite that fear. And they would learn that sometimes the best way to win a war is to teach your enemies how to live in peace. The galaxy was free, and it would remain free as long as beings like Jake Collins, Amy Baker, and Paul Green were willing to stand up and say the words that had started it all. You want war? Then you'll get one. But understand this, we don't just fight wars. We perfect them. The Empire had fallen, but the spirit of freedom would never die.